You're listening to WRUULP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul.
Check, check, 1, 2. Look like a little country, some rock and roll and blues, 'cause we sure love playing for good people like you. Let me know if you can hear me. Check, check, 1, 2.
Welcome to Music Local and Sustainable, the radio show that features discussions with and the music of local musicians. I am your host, Dave Lake. Tonight, I am so proud to have in the studio the Dean of Savannah Jazz, Teddy Adams. Trombonist and composer Teddy Adams is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to jazz, and particularly jazz in Savannah. Tonight, I hope to share some of that information and some of that knowledge with you. Welcome, Teddy Adams.
It's my pleasure being here, Dave.
Since a lot of your songs are written about family members, or the family member is the inspiration,
yes,
I'm always interested to find out what the family member's response is.
that's a good question. I've never been asked that before. And you know, don't think I'm vain or callous. I've never gotten any criticism or displeasure from what I've written. I don't know that they're overwhelmed by it, but it doesn't make me any difference because what I've written is what I visualize, observe, and feel that I've captured. So I would like for them to like it, but it would make any difference to me whether they like it or not, because I'm satisfied with what I've done based on my experience.
It's the way we approach people in general, I guess, because we have our vision of someone, and that may not be a shared vision of their own vision.
Right. But I'm satisfied with what I've done with my family members because I know them pretty well. And I've written something for everybody that's close to me and a few friends, those that are dear to my heart. And in some cases, I've written more than one tune for them. You know, my grandkids, I've covered that. The immediate family, I've covered all of that. Yeah.
Now, for a deeply emotional song like A Mother's Love, Did your mother ever hear that?
No, she never did. She never did. As a matter of fact, the songs that I wrote for my mother and my father, they never heard. They never heard. You know, they weren't jazz fans. They were proud of me. And the thing about it is, my father's probably the reason that both my brother and I played. He played the Jew's harp, and he played the harmonica, and played them very well, self-taught. You know, and he was the life of the party. We would have gatherings, and whether you wanted to be entertained by Alonzo Adams, that was his name, or not, he was going to entertain you. He would walk out and he'd come back in with both of them in his shirt pocket. So you knew then you could turn the music off or whatever you were doing because he was getting ready to let you have it.
Plan on it.
But he was good with both of them. A country approach, but you could tell that what he was doing, he was good at it.
Let's talk about another song.
I got a song here that I wrote for my eldest daughter, Tasha. There's a story behind it. She was born in Tokyo. The first time I saw her, it must have been about 12 o'clock noon. My wife started to have delivery pains, and I rushed home and called the ambulance. They came and got her, so they took her straight to the hospital, and I went over later. When I got there, she'd already had the baby. So I walked in, and during that time, the sex had not been determined by the ultrasound. So I asked her, was it a girl or a boy? And she told me it was a Pu Ying in Thai, that's girl. Pu Chai is boy. The nurse came in and said, do you want to see your daughter? I said, yes. We were in Tokyo. On the 28th January 1971, there were 11 babies in the nursery. So I go to this window, and I'm looking through, and all 11 of the babies are visible. And there's one brown baby out of the 11. Yet the nurse is going from baby to baby, checking the name tags. So I tapped on the window and pointed, said, I'm sure it's that one. It better be that one. She went over and picked it up and brought it to me. And the first thing that I noticed was she was all eyes, large eyes running my family. But she had the largest eyes I've ever seen. I knew then that eventually I would write something. So my first serious composition was simply called Her Eyes. And that's another song I went to Huxley and asked her to write the lyrics to, explain to her what it was about and all that. And she came up with something that I was pleased with. That's the other song. It's called Her Eyes.
Mystify me. Her eyes, her eyes, visions of her mother, visions there of me, Siam and Africa, the East. Her eyes hold a beauty that's very hard to duplicate, can't imitate. I helped to create them. That fills my heart with pride. Yes, inside. Oh, her eyes will captivate you. I'm sure she'll cast a spell with insight and vision. Her eyes. beauty that's very hard to duplicate, can't imitate. I help to create him that fills my heart with pride. Yes, inside. Oh, her eyes will captivate you. I'm sure she'll cast a spell within sight and vision. Her eyes, her eyes.
Even though on this song, Huxley wrote the lyrics, she's not singing it. Gina Renee is singing on this particular recording, but it was lyricized by Huxley.
With A Mother's Love, Huxley knew your mother.
Yes.
So Huxley also knows your daughter?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she knows all the kids. But what she based the words for my daughter strictly on what I told her. Plus, I mean, if you ever saw her, you would understand what I'm talking about if you ever looked at her. Huxley does a lot of writing, even though most of her music, most of it is of a spiritual or inspirational nature. But she captured what I've asked her to do pretty well. I'm satisfied with what she's come up with.
Tonight, I am so proud to have in the studio Teddy Adams. You said that your brother is a saxophone player?
Was. Yeah, I started out playing the saxophone. We were sharing the horn, but that didn't work out very well. He's 4 years my senior. He joined the Air Force immediately after high school, and he stopped playing. He was on flying status after basic training. He went to school, he started flying, and that became his new love. He still appreciates the music, very supportive, but he stopped playing altogether. But he was really the reason that I play. Like I said, he had already started making gigs. Nice to hear him practice. So when it's real funny, when I started playing and decided I was going to play the trombone, a lot of things that I heard him play, cliches and songs, were already in my mind. I learned how to play what I had heard him play on my horn, because his cliches were kind of commonplace among musicians, especially beginning. So that just reinforced it. What I had heard him play and I heard other guys play came together. So then I started to try to make that statement on my horn.
Why the trombone?
I thought it was easy. I figured that you play it, took the mouthpiece, and the slide did everything for you, which it does. But I didn't realize that how complicated it was. Yeah, I thought that slide would make it easier for some strange reason. After getting it, I almost regretted that I got it. I never thought about dexterity and valves and keys, how much easier it is to be fluent like this or like this rather than 7 positions. That didn't dawn on me. I didn't know any better. And when I started playing and doing band rehearsals, when the music got more difficult, and I was watching other people play, and I'm saying, it's right here. And I have 7 positions. That's not fair. I always regretted it. Until the second year with my mentor, Willie Draper, I used that as a crutch. It made me practice harder because I wanted to prove that I could do what you do, and it's more demanding, it's more awkward for me to do it. So we started playing together, and I was the youngest guy in the group. I was still in high school. So when he started writing and arranging, he would write and arrange for a guy that was getting it together. He would take that into consideration. And he drilled me so much and spent so much time with me, and I practiced so much, he decided, okay, you're serious enough. I'm going to start writing as if you are my equal, because you're holding me back now. And he was a Charlie Parker fan. He studied Charlie Parker very, very well. One of the greatest challenges in playing Charlie Parker's music is his melodies. You're not even into the solos. To be able to interpret and play the melodies to the song, that's an accomplishment, because the melodies sounded like improvised solos. I remember being in his room and playing something. I forgot what the song was, but there were a lot of difficult parts in there. And I was getting frustrated because I couldn't play them. So I got angry. I said, and he was giggling on me because I couldn't play them. And I said, look, you got a saxophone. All you have to do is flick your fingers and there are the notes. That ain't fair. I can't play it. I got a trombone. I have certain positions. It's too awkward for me. And that was the wrong thing to say. He got up and stood over me and said, the same notes on the saxophone on that trombone. I will never forget that as long as I live. Said, you don't have an excuse. Said, you have an excuse if I got some notes on the saxophone that you don't have on that trombone. Then I understand that you can't play it. But you got the same notes I got, so don't you ever tell me that again. And I never forgot that. I started to think about the slide differently. And then I started listening at guys I've always listened that was doing the same thing everybody else was doing with the trombone. Guys like J.J. Johnson, like Frank Rosalino, Jack Teagarden, an older guy. He and Louis Armstrong were a great team, and then Trummy Young, who was from Savannah. I said, well, I know that it can be done, so it's up to me to find out how to do it.
One great thing about the trombone is, I mean, you can just bend notes so well.
Yeah.
Compared to some of the other players.
It's the slide, quarter tones, less or more. And the thing about that is the approach of the trombone now is to get away from that. See, in the beginning, tailgating, that was the advantage of playing the trombone, especially in Dixieland music, it still is. But today, trombone players play like trumpet players. That's the status now. I can play just as fast and just as articulate as you with 7 positions, and you got 3 valves, a flicker of the fingers. So J.J. Johnson, probably more than anybody else, was responsible for that. He was the foremost trombone player during the bebop period, and that was very demanding music, and that was the revolutionary period in music. And he was the leading trombone player with Charlie Parker and Miles and Liz then. And so his articulation on the trombone really got my attention, because he was doing the same thing they were doing, with the same fluency, articulation, and tempos didn't mean anything, and playing all those hard melodies. And I said, okay, it's being done, so you just have to work at it until you can do it. But getting back to what you said, the advantage of the slide and getting different effects, you don't have to use the lip for that. You can do that to an extent with the armature on other horns, but the slide takes care of that with the trombone. Like for the vibrato, even though guys don't do it anymore, to get the vibrato on saxophones and trumpets, clarinets, it was done with the armature, with the lips, which takes a lot out of you. With the trombone, it was done with the slide. I remember Tommy Dorsey said, hey, that saves the chops. That saves the lips. Let the slide do the vibrato for you. J.J. Johnson never used that, so I'm out of that school where my tone is straight, and there's a very low vibrato, and that's done with the lips, as if you were playing trumpet or some other instrument. But guys don't do that anymore. But the old school was the vibrato was done with the shaking, the rapid shaking of the slide.
It's very interesting to follow the J.J. Johnson sort of approach and to take some of the advantages that the trombone has and sort of like throw those away. Is there other advantages that he took advantage of?
Well, they have been thrown away. I'm not real good at the plunger, say the Ellington approach. Ellington's trombone players with the toilet plunger and the mutes, they were unequal. Wycliffe Gordon is probably the best plunger player in existence today, and he's a youngster as compared to the other guys. But it's good to be well-rounded. I do it some, but I'm not adept to doing it. He's basically a young man with an old spirit. He comes out of another approach to playing the trombone, the older approach. He can play anything, and he's a tremendous trombone player, but he's not your average modern-day trombone player. He's old school. I think that's why Wynton Marsalis liked him so much. Wynton being from New Orleans and knowing about tailgating and using the slide as a form of expression, he gave Wycliffe his big break, and now he's out there doing things on his own.
Tailgating. What do you mean by tailgating?
Taking advantage of the slide. In the Dixieland, the trombone always had using the slide for effects and accompanying the counterpoint, doing it with the effect of the slide. That's tailgating.
How about another song?
Okay, let's see what else I have here. I have 2 slow songs and 1 fast song, so I think I'll do another fast song. I have an interesting song here. It's called A Tad for Tad, and Tad is my grandson. There's a story behind that. He was an interesting little fellow. He's his second year at Kennesaw State now. He was an interesting guy when he was real small. I got this melody. I was trying to decide on what rhythm I wanted to put under the melody. So I thought about second line rhythm of New Orleans. And that's what I really said, okay, for what I've written, that's the ideal rhythm for this song. And Quentin Baxter, when I recorded it, I told him, okay, we're going to do this tune I've written for my grandson, and I want to do the second line rhythm, New Orleans beat. And he calls me Dad. He refers to my wife and I as his adoptive parents. We've become very, very close. He said, I know how you are about your music, but you mind if we try something differently? I said, depends on what it is. He said, I can do the second line rhythm for you if you want it, but there is a Gullah Geechee rhythm that's of African origin, just like the second line rhythm is, that is equally as effective. So why don't you let me play that? If you like it, use it. If not, we'll do the second line. And Gullah Geechee, of course, is from southern North Carolina to the northern part of Florida, straight the Atlantic, with the greatest concentration being between Charleston and Brunswick. That's where the Gullah Geechee, the way of talking and the African cultures is very strong. And he said, let me do this Gullah Geechee rhythm. So he played it for me, and I said that would work. And then on top of that, he overdubbed the washboard and spoons that just epitomized Gullah Geechee rhythm. And right now, it's a drag because everybody knows about the second line rhythm. So when I don't have him on drums, I have to settle for the second line New Orleans rhythm rather than the Gullah Geechee, but it suffices, it'll fit.
The rhythms, such as the Gullah Geechee rhythms, are not as well known by other musicians.
No, the second line is well known.
Yeah,
that's because
that's a very standard New Orleans.
Yeah, New Orleans, and regarded as the birthplace of jazz. Savannah has a very strong brass band history, and it was developed independently. Nobody went to New Orleans and said, let's try to do what they're doing out here. It just happened. We have a very strong heritage here. There's a book by Dr. Charles Elmo called All That Savannah Jazz. He really chronicles what transpired here in Savannah musically. A lot of what transpired here was very similar to that which transpired in New Orleans, and it just happened that way. So the Gullah Geechee rhythm, it's not well known. When it's played, you understand where it's coming from, and it's very, very similar to that of New Orleans, and no one went there and copied it. It's just from the islands in this area.
Bringing that rich African heritage into jazz.
Right. The rhythm. You see, syncopation and rhythm in Western music is almost incidental. It's a part of it. In African music, it's equal. Rhythm and syncopation in Africa is much more prevalent and important than it is in Western music.
You're listening to WRUU-LP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul. If your business enjoys the programming on WRUU-LP, please support the station with a donation. Let your customers, neighbors, and friends know that you share our vision of building a thriving economy based on a diverse and vibrant community. Our listeners will know you support Savannah's only broad-based community radio station. Become a tower sponsor or underwriter. To check out the levels of corporate sponsorship and to donate, go to www.wruu.org/corporate. Again, to check out the levels of corporate sponsorship and to donate, go to www.wruu.org/corporate. Thank you for listening to and supporting WRUU-LP. You're listening to music local and sustainable, and I'm your host, Dave Lake. Tonight, I am so proud to have in the studio the Dean of Savannah Jazz, Teddy Adams. Now, when someone comes to a jazz concert, what are some of the important features that they should be looking for? What are some of the important things that they should be appreciating?
That's a very good question. Jazz is kind of difficult to understand. That's why a lot of people don't like it, especially the more profound and involved jazz. That's why a lot of people don't like it. Say, I don't understand that. I don't understand that. Like one of the most common responses when I teach children is, why don't you like jazz? Because they don't. And I'm prepared for that. And then I show them that you like it and don't know that you like it, because then I take and show them how their songs and the music they like can be made into jazz and other things. But the most common response is, and they ain't got no words. I don't like jazz because it's based on an improvisation. They like singing. So then I have to let them know about singing is still jazz. You let them listen to Louis Armstrong. Louis Armstrong, in my book, was the first jazz singer because his singing was merely an extension of his playing, his phrasing. He was the first scat singer. He's my favorite singer, Louis Armstrong. So when you show them how singing is still improvisationally jazz because of the way notes are bent and the deviation from the actual melody, you have a better understanding of it. But it's like they should be made to feel good or happy to appreciate the music. Energy, rhythm. Duke Ellington really surmised it when he said, it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. So they should be able to respond rhythmically. If it's just the nodding of the head, the patting of the feet or whatever to the music, and enjoy melodically what's happening. Rhythmic, melodic response. It should be pleasing to them in order for them to enjoy what you're doing. I have a motto, and I live by it, and it has worked for me. I don't think I'll ever change. My motto is this: you give the audience some of what they want, you can give them some of what you want them to have. So all of my concerts are a mixture of familiar songs and my originals, and it works. It's worked for me thus far.
Are there specific techniques that you would like the listener to be knowledgeable about?
Technical facility and empathy. What the musician can do musically to make the music relate to you and you relate to the music. Sometimes you can listen and a guy plays and you feel it, and you know that you feel it. And so that's really putting pressure on the musician. But that's important for an audience to feel what you're doing. An audience should be able to empathize with the music. An audience should be able to respect and recognize the fluency and technical ability of the musicians that are playing. And very, very importantly, and it's easier said than done, they should realize what's being given to them as being created within the moment. Normally, when I give a concert, my audience is going to get a lesson from me whether they want it or not. I tell them about the caliber of musicians that I have up there, because I'm a stickler for. I'll lose money sometimes and bring guys in if I can't find anybody locally that I think can do what I want done. So they need to be made aware of the musicianship and just the creativity of the music, and I make them aware of it. I tell them, because there's a story behind all of my songs, and there's a lot of trivia that I know about musicians. And I interject the trivia about the musicians that they know and the trivia about the music that I'm writing, and the profoundness of being able to create within the moment and the quality of the musicians that's going to play for them. I let that be known before we even start playing. I've always given my musicians credit and let them know that the guys up here are learned musicians, and most of the guys I use, when I say learned musicians, have degrees. And it's not that I have anything against guys that don't have degrees, but that's the way of the musicians today. You're not going to find a young musician today that does not have a degree. It just doesn't happen anymore. When I came up, it was OJT, on-the-job training. You learn from one another. You learn from the older guys. That's still being done. But they didn't even have jazz curriculums in school when I was coming up. They had music curriculums. The average musician that had a degree in music education or music performance. Now, all of the major schools have jazz studies programs. Therefore, every young musician out there today has a degree. And when I say every young musician, that might be an exaggeration, but I say 98% of them. That's the way it's done. Like, when you finish high school now, if you're going to go into medicine or engineering or whatever it is, so, okay, what school offers the best program, or what school can I afford that offers that program? That's the way it's done now with jazz musicians. Every young man goes to school. It's a downside to that. I said that they're cloning them. You're being taught the same thing, so you're going to come out playing the same thing. But everybody has a certain amount of innateness. Some people have a true talent for it. So that's going to make the difference. You can teach almost anything to an intelligent person. But if you don't have an inherent talent for a certain thing, it's not going to come out the same way as that person that does have that talent. I don't know of any musician out there playing today, young guy, that does not have a degree in jazz studies or performance. I'm sure that they are, but that's not the way it's done anymore. Like the Marsalis brothers, all those guys got master's degrees. And the people that they surround themselves with, that's just the way it's done. All of the major colleges and universities now got some top-notch jazz person and a jazz curriculum. I doubt if you can name one major school that doesn't have that. And then you got the other small schools that only do music. A kid right now, he's applying for a scholarship to see who can give him money to come and study. So that's understood that you're going to further your education in music if you're going to be a jazz musician. It puts you at a disadvantage if you don't do it, unless you're just one of those whiz kids that cannot be denied. But they don't even think that way anymore. They understand that I want to play and it takes practice, but I also need a degree because it's better to have than to have not.
And probably my first exposure to jazz was the great, many-degreed Dr. Billy Taylor. His appearances on popular news television shows is probably my first exposure to jazz, because I did not come from a family where jazz was an important thing. Listening to him said, this is something. I need to listen to this more.
He was a pioneer. He was a pioneer in jazz education. When Bud Tucker came here and we started playing, he tried to get the city to establish the Jazzmobile, which he had been on the ground floor when Billy Taylor established it in New York. The city wasn't progressive enough to do that. But, you know, getting a flatbed or whatever and going into different neighborhoods and just putting on an informative educational jazz program, they wouldn't buy it until they didn't think it was significant enough. Billy Taylor, he is probably the first of the jazz musicians to really emphasize and take jazz education to the masses. You know, he's probably the first. Right now, Wynton Marsalis is doing a tremendous job. I mean, I listen to some of those shows that he does on Saturday. He's doing a whole lot for the music. And, you know, he's all right with me. I respect him for what he's doing for the music. I respect him for his technical facility on the trumpet. But he has been deemed the representative for the art form of jazz here in America. And I think that he's doing a great job as far as representing it. And he's articulate, and he can explain it where you can understand it. And I've heard several of his presentations, and he's doing all right with me.
Tonight, I am so proud to have in the studio Teddy Adams. Now, when you have a tune and you're playing it out in a club, every time you play it, it's different.
Basically, the melody may be the same, will be the same, but improvisationally. Sometimes there are certain things that you want done the same way, but when improvisation starts, then you want to be fresh. You don't want to play the same ideas or cliches that have been played in the past. And if you play with different guys, you won't hear that. You play your song or a song, and with different people, new ideas are brought. That's why I'm enjoying composing so much. To hear my music played and interpreted by other musicians who can play is a very, very great feeling. A great feeling.
It's really interesting, too, how different people have completely different reactions to players. I guess that's true of any musician, but jazz musicians tend to evoke a lot of dichotomy in terms of appreciation.
They do, especially those that are exploring out of the box, reaching other boundaries. You know, if it's not da-da-da-da-da conventional, then a lot of people tend to shut down and not even consider what they're doing. Some of it is called avant-garde. Some of it is just leaning towards something else. Those musicians run into opposition and not being accepted all the time. John Coltrane, the public can deny him, and a lot of people still don't like him because the musicians say, I don't care what you all think, this is the new voice. You know what I mean? But Wayne Shorter, one of the most profound musicians I've ever heard, he has kind of lost his audience. After you get to a certain point as a musician, I think that perhaps those guys care less about what John Q. Public thinks. It's more about being creative and what I want to do with the music. I mean, I have done something, and you understand that I can do. I've done something that you like, but it's more to it than that. So I'm going to do this whether you like it or not. I hope that you do, but I'm going to do it even if you don't. And that's, once again, that's one of the fallacies of the acceptance of jazz for the profound art form that it is. You can't pigeonhole jazz. It's free. Jazz and freedom are equal. And because it's free and because there are no boundaries, unfortunately, you're going to incur the wrath of those who don't understand or who won't accept. You know, and there are a lot of them.
I'm generalizing, so, but I see a lot of folks, for instance, here in Savannah, who do go to some of the jazz concerts, really like the straight ahead jazz. I guess I'm much more of the experimental jazz, to see where the music takes the artist, rather than the sort of rote, straight ahead approach.
Only a few of you all out there. You even got musicians who won't accept that. I do a lot of reading about musicians and music. They tried to pit Louis Armstrong against Charlie Parker. Pops could be understood. He was equally as much an entertainer as he was a musician, and he was a master musician. So when bebop was heard and being introduced, they just goaded him into saying something, you know, like one of his statements was, "It sounds like Chinese music to me." That was a quote. You know, I mean, you know, and that didn't go away. So some of the old timers, they talk very, very badly. And I guess I can understand that, because bebop was so far from what they had been playing and what they recognized, until they were just kind of prompted into sing it or pushed into sing it. If they had never been asked, they never would have made that statement. On John Coltrane and Duke Ellington. Duke Ellington is old school. And when they played, when John Coltrane started to lean and got out of the box, Duke would lay out. He respected it, but I mean, he was of another era, so he would let Train get it off his chest, and then he'd come back in. But that's one of my favorite albums, because Duke understood there are some things here that I'm not in tune to, so I'm not going to hinder him.
Well, maybe that's why there is a Louis Armstrong airport, but not a Charlie Parker airport. And maybe that's why there's a Duke Ellington School of the Arts.
Yeah, in D.C.
And not a John Coltrane School of the Arts.
Yes, it's going to be all right one day. But taking nothing from Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington, in my opinion, is probably America's greatest jazz musician, one of America's greatest musicians, period. In that he wrote jazz, and it was so strong and impressive until his jazz songs became American standards. Normally jazz songs become jazz standards, and they reign supreme in the jazz idiom. But Duke Ellington's music, he was a jazz musician, they know it's jazz, but some of his standards, some of his songs are part of the American songbook, and the longevity, you only think of them as being jazz, or you relate them to jazz because he wrote them. Had he not written them, they would just be another great American song. And plus, Duke was underrated as a piano player. Really underrated as a piano player. One of the books that I have read on Duke Ellington, they were doing a concert. Thelonious Monk came on before the Duke Ellington band. Duke didn't even know who he was. So he started playing and said Duke was in the wings. So he walked to the edge, and whoever was standing next to him and said, "Who's this new guy here that's playing all of my stuff?" Monk was greatly influenced by Duke and loved his music, but voicings, dissonance, rhythm, a lot of Duke Ellington was in Thelonious Monk. A lot. Charlie Mingus was another guy that was obsessed with Duke Ellington. Duke, and I have some trio music by Duke Ellington and Jimmy Blanton, and Duke Ellington and Charlie Mingus, just trio. Duke Ellington was quite a piano player, but he was known as an arranger, as a composer, and a big band leader. But he also played great piano.
Again, it's interesting to talk to other people in terms of how they view artists. For instance, there are the people who really love, say, Miles Davis's Porgy and Bess, where I'm much more Bitches Brew. And sometimes we can agree on Kind of Blue.
Bitches Brew was a radical change for Miles Davis. He'd already changed the music several times. He's given credit for the cool school of jazz. In the beginning, that was his approach to playing. Chet Baker was greatly influenced by Miles Davis. When Miles Davis went to the West Coast, they were already doing that cool thing, but he fit in perfectly there because that was what they were doing. The East Coast had that fire and the energy level, and I'm an East Coast musician, and I still love it. But Miles Davis, when he started doing Bitches Brew and the other fusion music, people compared that music to early Miles. And it was so different until a lot of people refused. As a matter of fact, some musicians said that Miles messed jazz up. See, he was the guy that started pushing it in the other direction, and they were mad because of what he had done, in their opinion, in the past for jazz. But Miles was a trendsetter, and he really didn't care. And strangely enough, reading Miles, by Miles, and I think it's Quincy Troupe, he was in France or somewhere playing, and some irate fan came up to him after one of his fusion concerts and used vulgarity as to what he thought about the music. You used to be great in my book. You're not great anymore. So Miles told him, using an explicit, you will never hear that anymore. See, if you love that so much, go out and buy my records. I'm some other place now. And oddly enough, before he died, his last recording with Quincy Jones, he went back to old school. And he called Wallace Roney in as a backup trumpet player because he was not well. His endurance was not up to par. And Wallace Roney is one of those guys that is almost a Miles clone. So he had him as a backup trumpet player in the event that he couldn't do certain things. Full circle. All of those changes, all of those things that he had affected in the way of musical change before he died, he was back to the Miles that everybody loved. Miles didn't care. He was a genius in his own right. And I was so disappointed with the movie Miles Ahead. I was just disappointed. I don't think it did him justice. I don't think they did Charlie Parker justice in the movie Bird. I guess you could call them great movies, but they did nothing for the essence of the individual. You never knew that Charlie Parker was a genius if you saw that movie. Wayne Shorter, Miles Davis, can't say no on Ornette Coleman because he came on the scene experimenting. Sun Ra, those guys don't care about acceptance. They believe in what they're doing. And Miles was a perfect example of that. I mean, his whole thing about public opinion and what people thought of him didn't faze him one way or the other. So all the criticism he got about his fusion music, he just produced more. You know, and I caught him live in Tokyo a little before I left from over there. He had two guitar players, and he had M. Toomey, Jimmy Heath's son, playing percussions. I mean, and some of the songs that he was playing during that concert sounded like James Brown's rhythm. You could get up and dance to it. But I mean, I understood that Miles was still Miles, and he was playing right over the top of all that other stuff that was going on. He never stopped being Miles. And he had Dave Liebman. He had a strong band, but he was definitely in another direction. And it so far removed from the 50s until people just couldn't fathom him being serious. They didn't think it was serious music. They thought he was just doing something for the sake of doing it. But he was being Miles. And there was more depth to that than people thought. That wasn't just what they thought they were hearing. Different time signatures and different things were going on in that music. It was electronic and it was free, but people couldn't appreciate it because they didn't understand it. And once again, we're back to the understanding of the music. That's one of the fallacies of acceptance by the public. They don't even understand straight ahead music sometimes because it's improvisational. But when you lean or you get out of the box and experiment, explore, you really lose John Q. Public.
Well, yeah, even in straight ahead, if you listen, say, to the chord changes as they're going through the improvisation, if you listen to some of the rhythmic shifts that they do as they go through the improvisation, that is really exciting.
Yep.
And informative about that artist. I have a limited ability to hear, I think, and so I tend to concentrate often on different performers during a concert and really sort of concentrate on them to see what they're doing. That's why I love recordings, particularly live recordings, because you can do that. You can put it on again and listen to the background. You know, you can listen to the chord changes. You can listen to the rhythms.
You know, it's real funny as you would say that, and that as long as I have been listening, I can pull up old records tonight and still hear something that I didn't hear before as many times as I've heard it. By listening, you can concentrate on one aspect of the music and then go back and do it again. And if you got a lot of good players, or all the players are good on the recording, everybody has something to say, and everybody is worthy of individual concentration. You try to put it all together, sometimes it's overwhelming.
This has been just wonderful. I've just really enjoyed having a chance to talk to you. So tonight we have been with Teddy Adams, the Dean of Savannah Jazz, and I hope you've gotten as much out of this as I've gotten out of this with our conversation here with Teddy Adams. Thank you so very much.
It's been a pleasure for me to be here, and thanks for inviting me to just share the art form that I love and I would like to see the world embrace and truly appreciate.
And so we need to go out and listen to more jazz.
Definitely.
Thank you.
This has been another edition of Music Local and Sustainable, and I've been your host, Dave Lake. Save this time for another show next week.
Well, I know we ain't headed for the Hall of Fame. Gonna give it what we got, man, that ain't no shame. Let me know if you can hear me. Check, check, 1, 2. Let me know if you can hear me. Check, check, 1, 2.